Welcome back to History Addict. Today we're traveling back to the untamed American frontier, a place where the landscape was as unforgiving as the history it witnessed. Picture this, standing on a sun-scorched ridge with the dry valley sprawling out before you and the scent of pine lingering in the air. In this harsh terrain, we meet Two Moon, a Cheyenne leader, standing at the crossroads of survival and resistance. Through the words of an interpreter, we'll step into a moment in time, hearing firsthand the memories of battles fought, of resilience, and of a way of life that would never be the same. Join us as we dive into the story of Two Moon, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and the struggles that defined an era. As we reach the summit of the low, pine-covered ridge and gaze down into the scorching dry valley, my Cheyenne interpreter, Wolf Voice, gestured toward a small log cabin near the green line of alders where the Rosebud River flowed and said, "That's Two Moon's place." The harsh landscape stretched out before us, dry and sun-baked. The sparse trees offered little reprieve from the oppressive heat that had settled over the valley like a heavy blanket. We continued our approach, but soon we encountered a fork in the road. To the left, the path skirted a wire fence, while the right trail led into an open field. We initially took the left path, uncertain of where it would lead, but soon noticed a man standing at the cabin door, waving a blanket and directing us to the right. He seemed to be offering guidance, much like how Two Moon had led his people during turbulent times. Drawing closer, we could see Two Moon himself, spreading blankets in the meager shade of his small, rustic cabin. Nearby, young Cheyennes sharpened a sickle, their movements methodical and practiced, while two children played around the log stables. The cabin itself, much like the landscape around it, was simple and utilitarian, a testament to the hardship and endurance of its inhabitants. The barnyard and surrounding structures resembled those of a white settler, an image of sparse survival in a hostile environment. The harshness of the land seemed to mirror the struggles that Two Moon and his people had faced over the years. Despite the humble surroundings, Two Moon welcomed us with the same dignity and pride that one might expect from a great chief. As we dismounted from our horses and approached the door, Two Moon emerged to greet us, extending his hand in welcome. "How?" he said warmly with a long, drawn-out note of hospitality. It was a greeting filled with sincerity, spoken in a way that reflected his character, firm yet welcoming. He gestured for us to sit on the blankets he had laid out, inviting us into his world. His figure was still impressive despite his advanced years. Two Moon stood tall, his posture erect, his chest broad, a reminder of his former days as a warrior. His face, though weathered by time and hardship, was warm and friendly. As he prepared his tobacco, I noticed the strength in his hands, a sign that he had retained much of his physical vigor despite the years that had passed. His demeanor was courteous and composed, exuding a quiet authority that came naturally to him. Wolf Voice conveyed my intentions to Two Moon. I told him that I had come to hear his story of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. I had heard he was a chief there and wanted to hear his account. Afterward, I wished to take photographs of him, especially of him signaling with a blanket, much like the great chiefs did in battle. The message, passed through Wolf Voice, also contained words from the agents which seemed to carry some weight with Two Moon. At each pause in the translation, Two Moon responded with deep, resonant sounds. Ho. These sounds, though often misunderstood as grunts, carried a wealth of meaning. They were drawn-out exhalations, rich with thoughtfulness and understanding. Then, a prolonged silence followed as the elderly man seemed to search his memory, drawing himself back to the days of his youth, to a time when the world was very different. It took time for him to transition from the quiet of the sweltering valley, the shade of his modest cabin, and the wire fence enclosing his pasture, back to the days when his people were free to roam the plains, unburdened by fences and restrictions. When he spoke again, it was with deliberate thoughtfulness, his voice carrying the weight of years and experience. His expression grew increasingly solemn, and his gaze seemed to turn inward, as if he were no longer with us in the present, but back on the battlefield, reliving the events that had shaped his life. Two Moon was not fond of recalling the days of war, but considering that I was working on a book and that the agents had mentioned I was a friend of George B. Grinnell, a man respected by the Cheyenne, Blackfeet, and Gros Ventre, he agreed to share his story. In the spring of 1876, my Cheyenne tribe and I were camped along Powder River with 50 lodges. The location is near what is now Fort McKinney. One morning, soldiers led by Three Fingers, Colonel Mackenzie, charged my camp. We were taken by surprise and scattered, abandoning our ponies. The soldiers seized all our horses. That night, while the soldiers slept, leaving the horses unguarded, we quietly approached and reclaimed them, then departed. His voice was steady, yet tinged with the bitterness of those early confrontations. The loss of their horses had been a significant blow, but the Cheyenne were resourceful. They reclaimed what was theirs under the cover of night, a testament to their resilience and their knowledge of the land. We traveled a great distance, he continued, and one day, we stumbled upon a large Sioux encampment at Charcoal Butte. We joined the Sioux camp and enjoyed ourselves with plenty of grass, game, and good water. Crazy Horse was the chief of the camp. Sitting Bull had his camp a short distance away, near the Little Missouri River. His face softened slightly as he recalled the camaraderie of that time, the unity between the Sioux and Cheyenne in the face of a common enemy. Crazy Horse expressed, "I'm pleased you're here. We're gearing up to fight the white man again." The camp was already occupied by wounded men, women, and children. Two Moon's eyes darkened as he remembered his response to Crazy Horse. I replied, "All right, I'm prepared to fight. I've fought before. My people have been killed, my horse is stolen, I'm ready to fight." His voice grew more intense as he spoke, filled with the passion of a man who had lost much and was ready to defend what little remained. "At that time," he said, his face now serious, "I thought the Great Spirits had positioned the Sioux over there," he gestured to the right, "and the white men and Cheyennes over here," motioning to the left, expecting them to fight. I thought the Great Spirits enjoyed seeing the conflict. It was like a game to them. So I thought a lot about fighting. This admission revealed a deeper layer to Two Moon's mindset at the time. The conflict with the U.S. Army was not just a matter of survival for him. It was intertwined with his spiritual beliefs. The battle was not just between men, but part of a larger cosmic struggle, watched over by the spirits. Around May, when the grass was tall and the horses were robust, we packed up and headed toward the mouth of the Tongue River. Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and everyone else traveled up the Rosebud. There, we engaged in a significant battle with General Crook and emerged victorious. While many soldiers lost their lives, few Indians were killed. It was a fierce encounter with plenty of smoke and dust. Two Moon's recount of the battle with Crook painted a picture of a hard-fought but decisive victory. The Cheyenne and Sioux forces had triumphed, pushing back the encroaching army, but the victory was only a brief respite. From there, we crossed the divide and set up camp in the Little Horn Valley. Everyone thought, now we're out of the white man's reach. He can have his land and we'll have ours. After a few days one morning, while I was encamped north of Sitting Bull, a Sioux messenger came and announced, "Get ready, cook and prepare for a big dance." The Cheyennes got busy cooking, cutting tobacco, and preparing. We planned to dance all day, feeling happy to be far from the white man. This sense of security, however, would prove to be short-lived. I went to water my horses at the creek, washed them with cool water, then took a swim myself. I returned to camp on foot. As I approached my lodge, I glanced up the Little Horn toward Sitting Bull's camp. I noticed a huge cloud of dust rising, resembling a whirlwind. Soon, Sioux horsemen dashed into camp yelling, "Soldiers are coming! Lots of white soldiers!" I dashed into my lodge and urgently told my brother-in-law, "Get the horses ready, the white men are approaching. Everyone hurry and grab your horses." His voice grew more animated as he recounted the sudden onset of battle. The tranquility of the camp shattered in an instant, replaced by panic and chaos. From far up the valley, I heard a war cry, "Hey ye! Hey ye!" along with gunfire rapidly coming closer. I couldn't spot any Indians. People were scrambling to saddle their horses. After I secured my horse, a Sioux warrior returned, warning, "Many soldiers are on their way." Then he directed, "The women, step aside. We're gearing up for a challenging battle." I responded, "Okay, I'm prepared." Two Moon's role as a leader became evident in his next words. I mounted my horse and rode out into the camp. I called out to the people in a frenzy, "I am Two Moon, your leader. Don't flee. Stand your ground and fight. We must confront the white soldiers. I'll remain, even if it costs me my life." The battlefield was a chaotic, swirling mix of dust, smoke, and men, both soldiers and warriors, engaged in a life-and-death struggle. I rode swiftly toward Sitting Bull's camp. There, I witnessed the white soldiers engaged in battle in a line, Reno's men. The flat land was covered with Indians. They began to push the soldiers, all mixed together. Sioux, then soldiers, then more Sioux, all firing their weapons. The air was thick with smoke and dust. Two Moon's description of the battle was vivid, filled with action and emotion. I observed the soldiers retreat and descend into the riverbed like stampeding buffalo. They had no opportunity to find a crossing. The Sioux pursued them up the hill, where they encountered more soldiers in wagons. Then messengers arrived, reporting that more soldiers were threatening to harm the women, prompting the Sioux to turn back. The chaos and confusion of the battle were palpable. Two Moon's voice grew more somber as he continued. Afterward, I headed back to my camp and halted the women from moving the lodges. While I was mounted on my horse, I spotted flags emerging over the hill to the east, like this. He raised his fingertips. Suddenly, the soldiers arose all together, all on horseback, like this. He put his fingers behind each other to indicate Custer appearing in columns of force. He described the unfolding battle in stark, brutal terms. They organized into 3 groups, squadrons with some distance between them. Then a bugle sounded, and they dismounted while some soldiers led the horses back over the hill. Then the Sioux galloped up the ridge from all directions, riding really fast. The Cheyennes took the left path, and then the gunfire started. Rapid, pop, 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 very fast. The imagery of soldiers falling, horses collapsing on top of them, and warriors circling like water around a stone was vivid. Some soldiers were on their knees, some standing. Officers were all up front. The smoke was thick, like a huge cloud. And wherever the Sioux went, the dust billowed up like smoke. We surrounded them from all sides, moving like water swirling around a stone. We shot, rode fast, then shot again. Soldiers fell, horses tumbled on them. Soldiers in line dropped, but one man rode back and forth along the line, shouting all the while. He rode a chestnut horse with a white face and white legs. I don't know who he was, but he was a brave man. As the battle drew to its bloody conclusion, the soldiers' resistance crumbled. Indians kept circling around and around, and the soldiers only managed to kill a few. Many soldiers fell. Eventually, all the horses were killed, except for 5. Occasionally, a man would break free and dash towards the river, only to fall shortly after. Finally, about 100 men and 5 horsemen stood on the hill, all bunched together. Throughout, the bugler kept blowing his commands. He was also very brave. Then a chief was killed. I heard it was Longhair, Custer, but I'm not sure. Then the 5 horsemen and the group of men, maybe around 40, started toward the river. The man on the chestnut horse led them, shouting all the while. He was dressed in a buckskin shirt, with long black hair and a mustache. He fought fiercely with a large knife. All his men were coated in white dust. I couldn't tell if they were officers or not. One man, all alone, ran far down toward the river, then circled back over the hill. I thought he might escape, but then a Sioux fired and struck him in the head. He was the last man. He had braids on his arms. All the soldiers were dead, and their bodies were stripped. After that, it was hard to distinguish who were officers. The bodies remained where they fell. We didn't have a dance that night. We were filled with sorrow. The next day, 4 Sioux chiefs, 2 Cheyennes, and myself, 2 Moon, went to the battlefield to count the dead. One man carried a bundle of sticks. As we approached each dead man, we took a stick and passed it to another man, counting the dead in this manner. There were 388 bodies in total. Among them, there were 39 Sioux and 7 Cheyennes killed, along with approximately 100 wounded. Some white soldiers were slashed with knives to ensure they were dead, and the war women mutilated some bodies. Most of them were left where they lay. We reached the man with the big mustache. He was lying down the hill toward the river. Custer fell higher up on the ridge. The Indians didn't remove his buckskin shirt. The Sioux said, "That's a big chief. That's Longhair." I can't say. I hadn't seen him before. The man on the horse with the white face was the bravest of them all that day. With the story now complete, Two Moon took a deep breath and packed his pipe once again. His thoughts seemed to drift away from the past, back to the present. His face, though lined with the years of hardship and loss, was calm. "That was long ago. Now, in my old age, I think differently," he said softly. "I'd rather see my people residing in homes, enjoying music and dance. You've discussed battle with me, and I've recounted tales from the distant past. But those days are gone." His focus now, he explained, was on the future of his people, on securing their reservation, teaching them how to raise cattle, and educating their children. I want 3 things for my people: a fence around our land to keep out settlers, cattle, and dairy to sustain us, and education for our children. We must learn the ways of the white man, but never forget who we are. As the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows over the valley, Two Moon stood tall. His words had carried the weight of history, but also a sense of hope for the future. Though his people had suffered greatly, Two Moon believed that they could adapt, survive, and thrive in this new world, while never losing sight of their identity.